Sports Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the Buckeye Extra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brandon Matisse says, "Give me the rock." Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam. And now he does a little dance.
Now, the Buckeye Extra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Tuesday, March 10th, 2026. It is my official duty to welcome you into episode 540 of the Buckeye Extra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Welcome to the Jardy Basement. It is here in the evening on Tuesday night. By the time you hear this, it will be Wednesday, March 11th, in which case, shout out to my wife, Brittany. Happy birthday. Brittany has the unenviable job not only of being married to me, but of having to deal with the fact that her birthday frequently overlaps with the Big Ten tournament, and this year will be no exception. The year, a couple years back when Ohio State made that run and made it all the way to Saturday, after having played on the first day of the tournament, back when there were only 15 teams, back in the good old days, that run, the fact that that team kept winning, ensured that I missed her birthday that year. So this is an ongoing thing, but Ohio State won one more game, or had UCLA lost one more game, the Buckeyes would not be playing until later in the day on Thursday, and I would have left on Thursday morning. But as it is, I'll be leaving Columbus on Wednesday evening, but still time to go out to dinner and spend a little bit of time together on her birthday. And it is we won't say which one, but it is a milestone one. So I'm here with you on a Tuesday night. Had promised after the win against Indiana on Saturday that we'd get you another podcast on Tuesday leading into the Big Ten tournament. The going plan at that point was that Ohio State would have interviews on Tuesday before leaving Columbus. That plan changed. Ohio State was able to get a charter flight earlier on Tuesday, and so as of me recording this, I will have interviews with Jake Diebler, who is already in Chicago, sometime Wednesday morning. So it's likely this will be posted before we have interviews, but you know the drill by now. I'll have stories coming out of interviews. I'll certainly have the whole video uploaded to our website. All the build up and lead in to the Big Ten tournament will be coming to you Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, and then Thursday morning. It's going to be up and at them, as they say. Ohio State will take on opponent to be determined on Thursday morning, and that game will be 11 a.m. Central Time, so 12 o'clock for those of us back here in Columbus. And that game will be broadcast on Big Ten Network. So we will get Ohio State against the winner of a Wednesday morning game between number 9 seed Iowa, number 17 seed Maryland. Maryland took care of business against 16 seed Oregon earlier today. And as I'm recording this, Northwestern and Penn State are playing right now. I didn't bother watching a second of those games. I shouldn't put it that way, but I don't have a whole lot of interest in the 15, 16, 17, and 18 teams playing on Tuesday when the tournament is going to go all the way until Sunday. I don't have any idea what the crowds were, but I can't imagine maybe the Northwestern game, because at least it is the local school. But we don't know Ohio State's matchup yet. We won't know Ohio State's matchup until Wednesday afternoon. But we've still got some stuff here to talk about. Wanted to just kind of share some thoughts on Ohio State's draw in the Big Ten tournament and what this week could look like for the Buckeyes. We're going to get into some of the NCAA tournament projections, and I just wanted to get a little bit more into Bruce Thornton. I thought we should talk a little bit more about him and Senior Day and a little bit of reflection. So I got a couple of thoughts and went back through the archives for some early interviews and things like that. So we got a few things to talk about here. We also had all Big Ten awards announced on Tuesday. So I want to go over that and share with you some of the things I voted for. So that's going to carry the podcast here. Before we get to that stuff, I want to remind you that you can always subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. If you subscribe, you'll automatically get the newest ones just as soon as our man Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, can grab them and publish them for us. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review. Please click 5 stars, and please consider telling a friend. Thanks as always to everyone who's taking the time to do all those things. All right, so here's where Ohio State stands in all the important metrics and things as we inch our way closer and closer to Selection Sunday. So as of March 10th, Ohio State number 30 in the net, the Buckeyes 3-10 in quad 1, 6-1 in quad 2, so 9-11 in the top 2 quadrants, and no losses outside of those top 2 quadrants. That was the thing that we kind of kept getting at as the losses were piling up through the course of the season, when Ohio State essentially traded wins for losses for about a 2-month stretch, it seemed like. But Ohio State never took on, even the Pitt loss, for as disappointing as that loss was, still remained a quad 2 defeat for the Buckeyes. And there was no loss on this resume that really held it down to where certainly it needed high-end wins, and Ohio State does go into the Big Ten tournament with 3 quad 1 wins. It would like to have a few more, but that was always the thing throughout this, that the Buckeyes were not taking on the types of losses that would sink your resume on their own. They were just taking on a few too many, period. It's a resume that shows that this team essentially beat who it was supposed to beat and then just didn't take bad losses. The teams that beat it were teams that were generally ranked higher, or teams that were high enough in the net rankings that it didn't adversely impact Ohio State's standing. So Ohio State 30th in the net, 35th in the WAB. Are we familiar with the WAB? I'm still getting used to saying it because WABs, we're going to rhyme it with cab and tab, and former Cleveland Browns center Mike Babb, but wins above bubble, which is a key metric that everyone has been pointing at. Something the committee certainly is looking at the net and all those things, but also will be heavily considering wins above bubble. So Ohio State's 35th in that. Buckeyes up to 26th at KenPom, which is actually one spot better than they were projected to be when the season started. 28th in BPI, number 23 at Bart Torvik. And I've talked a lot, I feel like especially recently, about how at barttorvik.com, it's basically like KenPom, and you can sort data based on any portion of the season that you want. You can remove the preseason bias. You can remove, projections, just like from this date to this date, how has the team performed from an efficiency standpoint compared to everybody else. And since February 1st, this is still true now. Through March 9th, Ohio State has played as the number 13 team in the nation. And in March, which is, again, an admittedly small sample size, let's not go nuts with this here, but it's worth pointing out that in March, Ohio State has been the number 3 team in the country, behind number 1 Duke, and then, surprise, number 2 UCLA. So certainly coming on hot late for Ohio State. Looking at the other various projections, like as of Tuesday morning, Joe Lunardi had Ohio State as a 9 seed. And as he puts out his consistent updates throughout the day, looking at the bubble and things like that, Ohio State's not anywhere in any of that stuff, not even one of the last 4 teams to avoid Dayton. So the Iowa game will be a quad 1 game for Ohio State, assuming that it is, I guess I should say, assuming that it is Iowa. Otherwise, Maryland will be a quad 2 game, I believe. I'll double check that here in a minute. But chance for Ohio State on Thursday, most likely, I would guess, to add another quad 1 opportunity to its resume. But it does not appear at this point that anything that happens to Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament would knock the Buckeyes out of the NCAA tournament. They, at this point, very much, they would appear to be a lock. Could there be a scenario where they, say Maryland beats Iowa and then beats Ohio State? Could that drop Ohio State to flirting with having to go to Dayton? Even that seems unlikely at this point, given that we're talking about Ohio State. Some projections have them as an 8 seed. CBS has them as an 8. I think that's a bit high, but I don't see there being any real danger for Ohio State of, boy, if you don't win one here in Chicago, you're going to be sweating it on Sunday. It is going to be a enjoyable Selection Sunday for Ohio State. They're going to be called when we are unveiling brackets and filling out brackets. And can you guys believe we are that close? We're gonna have brackets in our hands in just a couple of days. Like this is so much fun. I love this time of year so much. So moving ahead here, we got all Big Ten awards today. Ohio State's Bruce Thornton was picked second team all Big Ten by both coaches and the media. John Mobley Jr. earned honorable mention from the media. And that was it for Ohio State on its all-conference representation. So here's how I voted. And the way that it works in the Big Ten balloting is they have a whole list of candidates. You can write in anybody that you want, but they basically have a list of all the people that you would think of. And you pick them in order from number 1 to number 15. And then, like, you know, the first place person that you pick gets 15 points, second place 14, so on. And that all gets tabulated, and then that's how they arrive at first team, second team, third team. So essentially, you know, you're not necessarily picking a first team, but you're ranking players 1 through 15 in the league. And I have to say, first of all, just how unbelievably difficult it is to try to figure out a top 5, a top 10, even a top 15 in an 18-team league, where you're leaving really good people off, like no matter what. I mean, there have been years where it's like, man, maybe only doing a first team and a second team. You're like, who fills out the end of the second team? Because you get to the dregs, it felt like, quickly at times. But this year, not the case. And my personal, the way that I try to approach it is I lean into, you might be an awesome player, but if your team is garbage, every garbage team has a leading scorer. So in my mind, that knocks people down a bit, because it's great if you're an elite player, an elite scorer, but if your team isn't winning, I will take someone who is dominant, but maybe a little less statistically dominant while playing for a better team over somebody who's the opposite of that. And so with that in mind, like, I punished like a Nick Martelli a little bit more, even though he's an unbelievable scorer for Northwestern. Northwestern finished where it finished in the league standings. And so to me, like, that factors in. So I looked at some of that stuff, and then also just like sheer dominance though at the same time. And so in spite of everything that I just said, I did have a Washington player in my top 5. So here's how I had it. My all Big Ten ballot from 1 to 15. And there are parts of this I don't like. It is what it is. I had Yaxel Lendeborg at 1, Keaton Wagler at 2, Illinois. I had Bruce Thornton 3rd, Jeremy Fears, Michigan State 4th, Hans Steinbach at Washington 5th, Bennett Sturtz, Iowa 6th. I had Braden Smith 7th at Purdue, Nick Martinelli 8th at Northwestern, Price Sanford 9th from Nebraska, and I probably should have had him higher. In fact, as I look at this now, I definitely should have had him above Martinelli. Tyler Bilodeau at UCLA 10, Cade Tyson at Minnesota 11, John Blackwell at Wisconsin 12, Adai Mara from Michigan 13, Sam Hoiberg, Nebraska 14, and Lamar Wilkerson, Indiana 15. So it's not a perfect list. I left some people off. I'm not necessarily happy about it. But when it came to the all Big Ten first team, when I look at who ended up being voted what, so from the so this is the coaches first team. Vogler from Illinois, Lendeborg, Michigan, Fears, Michigan State. I got all 3 of those. And all 3 of those were also on the coaches side. So, or on the media side, excuse me. So the media had, rounding out the top 5, Bennett Sturtz at Iowa and Braden Smith at Purdue. And the coaches also had Price Sanford from Nebraska and Braden Smith at Purdue. So I feel like Purdue underachieved to such a degree, and Braden Smith was just kind of like, I mean, he's clearly an all-conference player, but I felt like Bruce Thornton had a better year than Braden Smith did. And I really get into the numbers and start trying to break it down and try to quantify like who had a better what compared to this person. But it just felt to me like Purdue never got where it was supposed to get this year. We'll see what the tournament looks like. But I feel like Purdue and Braden Smith. Like, just here's one number, top of my head. Offensive rating at Ken Pom. Braden Smith finished with an offensive rating of 122.5, which is better than what he had last season. So he's at 122.5. Bruce Thornton was at 137.5. That's the 13th best in the nation. You look at some of the different analytic websites that break down player stuff and come up with their own sort of player rankings. Like, Bruce Thornton has been a top 5 to top 15 player nationally in like every one of those. And frankly, I'm surprised that he's not first team All Big Ten. And there's plenty of options. There's no shortage of. Trying to pick between Vogler, Fears, Smith, Wilkerson, Sturtz, Thornton, Nick Boyd, John Blackwell. Good luck. And I think anyone can pick any one of those people essentially and really make a strong argument and a strong case. But boy, the way Bruce Thornton closed this season and the critical role he played on getting Ohio State into the NCAA tournament. And I looked at of the top 7 scorers in the Big Ten, because Bruce Thornton's in that top 5. Bruce is the only one shorter than 6'7", and he's 6'2". Like, he's done so much from an offensive standpoint, and certainly a defensive standpoint, harder to quantify, but I think we've seen it. I thought he was deserving of it. And so my first team of Lendeborg, Vogler, Wogler, I don't know why I keep saying Vogler. The guys from Michigan a couple years ago just kind of messed with my head when it came to pronunciations. So Lendeborg, Wogler, Thornton, Fears, Steinbach. I felt like I had to put a big on there, like a big, and Steinbach's just been unbelievable. So that's how I saw it. I thought Thornton really deserved being first team all conference. Now, as far as preseason media poll, so I went back and I looked at my ballot and wanted to compare it to how the league finished. So I had Purdue number 1. I was 6 spots too high in Purdue. Purdue finished with the 7th seed. I had Michigan 2nd. Michigan finished 1st, so I was off by 1. I had UCLA 3rd, and the Bruins finished 6th. So I was 3 spots too high in UCLA. And I'm reminding myself going forward that I'm always going to move any West Coast team down 1 spot below where I think they should be. That's just how it's got to be going forward. I was dead on with Illinois, had the Illini 4th. They were 4th. Michigan State, I picked 5th. The Spartans finished 3rd, so I was off. I was 2 spots too low on them. Now, the first one where I just catastrophically missed was Oregon. I thought there was so much there, and injuries had a major role in this, and we never really got to see the Ducks get rolling, but there is so much talent on that roster that I had the Ducks 6th, and they finished 16th. So I was 10 spots off on Oregon, and I'll tap my chest and just say, my bad. Ohio State had 7th, the Buckeyes finished 8th. Iowa, I had 8th, and they finished 9th, so I was 1 spot off on them. I had Wisconsin 9th, and I was 4 spots too low on that. The Badgers finished 5th. Like I just said, I'm always going to bump a West Coast team down 1 spot in future polls. I'm going to bump Wisconsin up 1 spot from now on because they just consistently get there. I had Maryland 10th. I believed in Buzz Williams, and I was wrong. Second one that I missed on catastrophically. Maryland finished 17th, and I had them 10th. That I did not see the Terrapins falling off the way that they did this season. I had Indiana 11th. That was 1 spot too low. Hoosiers finished 10th. Minnesota, I was higher on than most. I think Nico Medved is going to be a really high-level Big Ten coach. And I had the Gophers 12th. They finished 11th. I was dead on with UCLA 13th. The next team I was way off on, and boy, in hindsight, but I had Nebraska 14th. And your Cornhuskers finished 2nd. I was off by 12. That was my biggest miss. And yeah, Fred Hoiberg, I apologize. And the last couple here, Washington, I picked 15th. I was 3 spots too low. Huskies finished 12th. Rutgers, I had 16th, and they finished 14th. Northwestern, I had 17th, and the Wildcats finished 15th. But I was dead on with Penn State being dead last. Nittany Lions never had anything all year, And I think, and we saw it coming, and it played out exactly how I thought it would go. So all in all, I got 3 of the 18 correct. And then I had 5 other ones that were within one spot of each other. So I was decently accurate on 8 of the 18. That's not very good. This stuff is hard. Now, as for the tournament, the Big Ten tournament here, I don't love this draw for Ohio State. Because like I said, so neither Oregon nor Maryland would be a quad 2 game on a neutral court. So if Maryland knocks off Iowa, then Ohio State will be playing a game on Thursday that can only hurt the resume. Iowa would be So Iowa would be a quad 2 game. So it helps your resume, certainly, but it's not necessarily going to move the needle in a major way. So Iowa is 25th in the net as of right now. And when it comes to the quad 1, quad 2 cutoff, I love when websites play music. I hope that music didn't come through. If it did, I apologize. That's the pop-up ad that always comes up on the NCAA's website when I double check all the net stuff. But Iowa would be a quad 1 game for Ohio State. So there's an opportunity there that would certainly look good in the holster for Ohio State. But maybe we find out that if it is in fact Iowa, that Iowa's just a terrible matchup for Ohio State. I'm more inclined sitting here right now to think that if Ohio State gets a rematch against Iowa, the way Ohio State has responded since that game, I feel like Ohio State wins and possibly comfortably. But frankly, nobody wants to play Michigan. I think you would take a draw that has you playing literally anybody else in the league as long as possible before you have to play the Wolverines. And instead, if Ohio State navigates either a quad 3 game or a quad 1 opportunity against a team that did handle the Buckeyes pretty decisively 2 weeks ago, it's just not a great draw. And then the result or the outcome of that with a win would be potentially losing to Michigan for a 3rd time and against a generational type of Michigan team. Like that's a tough draw for Ohio State. So I don't love where the Buckeyes sit in this. I think it's going to be, it's a tall ask for Ohio State to be playing on the weekend. That seems like that would be a lot. To get through that, Ohio State, if Ohio State is playing on Saturday, it would get some combination of USC, Washington, winner gets Wisconsin, winner that gets Illinois, and then that's who it would be on Saturday. So tough draw. That's how I see it. So now I do want to talk a little more about Bruce Thornton, like I said. So I went back through all my quote files, and if the amount of time I have spent transcribing interviews and the amount of just quotes that never got used, I mean, it's, oh my gosh, I can't even put it into words. But by my count, and I'm sure that there's a couple that I missed or a couple that maybe just like my quick searching didn't turn up, I believe that I've interviewed Bruce Thornton 78 times, which is probably a record for a player, given that he's been with the program or at least a record in my 11 years now on the beat for the Dispatch, because certainly guys don't stay for 4 years. And some of the guys that do, you're not talking to them after 11 different games. You know, you're mixing it up. You're talking to this guy, that guy, but like he's just been so critical to this team and has been such a mouthpiece for this program for so long that, man, I've talked to Bruce. I've interviewed him in Hawaii. I've interviewed him in the Bahamas. I've interviewed him at the Kingdom Summer League. I've interviewed him. I meant to go back and count how many different states in which I've interviewed Bruce Thornton, but it's a lot. It's a lot. It's wild. And so some of that really kind of filtered back through as I was writing some of the stuff last week leading into senior day of just how many different sort of deep dive type of stories that I've done on Bruce. I mean, from a story leading into his senior year about how it looked like he was potentially going to end up being a 5-star recruit. That obviously didn't happen. He was never flashy enough or, I guess high level enough to climb the recruiting rankings in a way that would make you a 5-star, but that certainly didn't change the impact of Ohio State signing him. So there's like deep dives there, like leading into his senior year. At the end of his senior year, the features that I try to do every year, where I interview the player and their high school coach, and really dive into what their senior season was like, so the fans at Ohio here in Columbus and the fans of Ohio State basketball can get to know these people better. Like that stuff. There were some deep dives there. I did, in-depth thing about him going to Atlanta and playing there for the first time with Ohio State. Certainly stories with him throughout about decisions to stay, interviews with his mom. Did a story, when he went back to Atlanta, talking to people that one of his first basketball coaches, like at school, at like middle school, I think it was, there in the Atlanta area, and like stories about the workouts they would go through. And I mean, just I've written, Bruce has been kind enough, and his family's been kind enough. Like, I've gotten to interview him in all kinds of different scenarios and told a lot of neat stories about who he is. Hopefully some stuff that allowed you to get to know him a little better. He's gotten to be a better talker for sure, but he's never been the most loquacious, quote. And at a microphone at a press conference, it's, it usually it's not the most like a headline grabbing, quote or anecdote or story or what have you. But I've just found him to be a really interesting player and a really interesting dude who is just always consistently been there. I mean, it's all the things that Jake Diebler has said, all the things that Chris Holtmann said before him. Like, there's so much there about the everyday mentality and approach and all that stuff. And he's been like that with the media. The number of times that I've talked to him after, like, he's the guy that I talked to on the road because he's the captain and they just lost, at Penn State and blew an 18-point lead, or they just lost at Pitt, or, what have you. And it's made some of the interviews then, when they do come away with a big win, all the more enjoyable, like just getting the opportunity to say, like, hey, we've talked through some of these just dog day games, just some of these, like, what do you say? How do you move on type of games? But then he's, that's one of the things I try to keep in mind, when I'm on the road and I'm the only Ohio State reporter there. And it's, you don't want to constantly ask for the same one or two people to talk to all the time. They get sick of it. I think as a reader, you want to hear from different players on the team. So I try to space that out. But like, there are times when it's like, you have to talk to Bruce. Like, he speaks for the team. He is this team's person. And so there's been a lot of these conversations over the years. So I went back, first time I interviewed Bruce Thornton. And I don't have the audio on this stuff. I just have the transcripts because I type everything out. But it's back on November 26, 2020, when he committed to Ohio State. And just some of the things that we talked about right off, just about like, hey, you committed to Ohio State. You'd never been to campus because of COVID. You couldn't visit. He said, I've been able to build trust and take every opportunity that I can during the process. I said, is it hard to get to know people? He said, yeah, it's been very tough. You can say different stuff through the phone instead of in person. So you have to be really attentive when you're making a decision. I feel like I made the right decision for myself. I said, why? Like, why do you feel that about Ohio State? He said, just a trust factor for me with Coach Jake Diebler and Coach Holtmann. I said, how'd you get on their radar? And he says, about 4 months ago. And I talked to him, one of the things I never really did a whole lot more in the way of a follow-up on, but it's the same high school that produced Shannon Scott. And he said, yeah, we talk every now and then, talk about making better decisions as a point guard, just being a better man. I said, did you pick his brain about his recruitment, about Ohio State? And Bruce said, he just said to be ready and prepared for all comers. You're going to be kind of nervous getting on campus, but as days go, you'll be all right. I said, what do you see your role as being, or how have they explained your role at Ohio State? This is a question I'm always very interested for the answer on this. So this is what Bruce Thornton told me when he committed to Ohio State, November 26, 2020. How have they explained your role? Just being a leader. I lead by example. Always put in the work. Always put in the time to become better every day. I believe that whatever I produce, other people will feed off of the energy and we'll make a better team overall. How, we're almost 6 years removed from that, but how dead on was that? Thinking about what Bruce Thornton's career has been at Ohio State. So he talked about being a winner. And this is a quote that he gave me the day that he committed. When I asked, like, what do you want fans to know about you? He said, when you win, they remember you. I've always had that mindset. Doesn't matter how many points I have or whatever. If I win, at the end of the day, they're going to remember my name. I said, when did you did you come up with that? Did someone tell you that? He said, it's always since I was little. He said, I just came up with that on my own. And he also talked unprompted about his relationship with Jake Diebler. And he said they had a really strong bond. I said, what is it about him? He said, we have a lot of similar traits. We were mostly underrated, mostly overlooked, but we just kept pushing through whatever. Everybody has their days, and everybody's going to shine one day. Thought there was some really interesting stuff in that interview. Reflecting on it now, 5.5 years later, and knowing kind of how this story played out for Bruce. So in 2021 article that I wrote about how he might become a 5-star prospect, and in there I was told that he had taken visits to Kentucky, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Auburn, and then I talked to his AAU coach, Julian Barfield, and in talking to Julian, I don't know that I ever wrote this, but he told me, quote, Bruce is like LeBron. Pause. Just think about that for half a second. And he said, he can have a triple-double, and someone might say Steph Curry is better because he had 37 hit 9 3-pointers. But I won the game, and I had a triple-double. He said, Bruce can dunk and throw it off the rim, put it between his legs. He can do all that stuff. But for him, it's more about winning and being efficient. I tell Bruce when I'm coaching him, push the ball, go get a bucket. He's like, yo, but coach, he's open over there. He said, that's why I compare him a little bit to LeBron, because he always makes the right play. I don't think I ever wrote the LeBron James Bruce Thornton comparison story, but I should have. That would have probably gotten a few headlines, a few clicks. So he gets to Ohio State, and first time that I interviewed him once he was on campus, Kingdom Summer League, 22 points on July 3rd, 2022. And as far as Ohio State, he said it was rough the first week. He said the conditioning, the weights, every day make sure you're on schedule, make sure you're tight on everything you do. He said that's a big thing Ohio State preached and really helped get my feet wet. So it wasn't too long after that, and then I know I spoke to him throughout the Kingdom Summer League. It wasn't too long after that Ohio State took a foreign exhibition trip to the Bahamas, played Puerto Rico and Egypt. Came out of there writing about Bryce Sensabaugh's offense. Had a really fun conversation walking through when the team got done with its catamaran experience, and then was heading back to their rooms. Had a long talk with Tanner Holden, fun conversation about the experience, picking Ohio State, hoping that all of those things that he did at Wright State would translate. And so that I can still picture walking through that resort and going past all the shops and the restaurants and just really pleasant conversation. And then I had a interview with Bruce Thornton. And I referenced this in the story that I wrote leading into senior day, but just standing outside the entrance to where they were staying. And the guys were kind of coming and going. I think it was their last day there. They were done playing and they had the evening to kind of do whatever. It's where I also found out that you like playing some card games. And since they were in the Bahamas, you could gamble if you were 18. So that was something they enjoyed. Quite a few of those guys were doing while they were there. But when I asked him about his confidence leaving that, because that was the last thing, and then everyone would go home, you get a little break, and then it was back for fall camp. I said, how's your confidence now compared to when you first got to campus? He said, these 2 months I've been working out. All the work I put in with Diebler and the coaching staff has been nonstop. I showed them this is what I worked for, and I'm really going to try to impose my will the whole season and stay consistent throughout the whole thing. I think that sums it up. It was fun going back and just looking at some of those early interviews and early conversations. And all those different stories they're online. I wish that it was easier to just kind of keep some of that stuff in one place. If you Google Adam Jardy, Bruce Thornton, Kingdom Summer League, or Adam Jardy, Bruce Thornton, 5-star, I have to get really specific and think of exact keywords that I might have used in headlines and things like that to find some of this stuff. I'm glad I have copies of it on my hard drive. I'm glad that I hang on to these things and that they don't just disappear off into the cloud, or you change a web server and suddenly a story that you had worked on for weeks no longer exists on the internet in any appreciable way that. I do run into that from time to time, but there's so much there. And I wanted to go back on this podcast and just revisit the beginning of the Bruce Thornton era and jot some of that stuff down. We'll see how this postseason plays out, and maybe there'll be a way to work some of that into some new coverage. So stay tuned on that. But just felt like it was a good time to kind of pause and reflect a little bit on some of that stuff before we get ready to head to Chicago. So seems like a good time to wrap this one up now. I should mention, I forget who it was that I ran into recently that was telling me that they listened to the podcast, and they said they liked that sometimes at the end I do talk about like some music stuff, and a couple albums lately that have caught my ear. I just came out a week or two ago. But Mitski, her album Nothing's About to Happen to Me, I've listened to that 2 or 3 times in like the last day or two, and I've been enjoying that more than I did it. Like the first listen, I was kind of like, but it's definitely growing on me. I've been listening to the Format's newest album. That's been holding steady for me here, and then two really, well, one recent album and one I just finally got. But I've been a Florence and the Machine fan for like way back in the day. Kiss with a Fist was her first song that I heard on the radio, and then I just fell in love with her voice, and she's just amazing. So anyway, her most recent album, Everybody Scream, came out like around Halloween, and I didn't pick it up because just something about it. Like I'm not a huge Halloween person, and it kind of seemed maybe like themed around that, and it just, I don't know, I wasn't necessarily feeling it, but I did get it the other day, and I listened to it a lot on that Penn State drive, and boy, there's some deep stuff on there, and there's some unbelievable songs. Like there's the song You Can Have It All, which is the second to last song on the album. Like she gets to the chorus, and her voice just is unbelievable. She is such an incredible singer. I love her music. Really glad that I picked that up. And then I've also been listening a lot to the new album by Snowcaps. I started getting into the band Waxahachie in the last year and a half, and there's like a whole sound there that I'm starting to explore a little bit more, and there's a lot of a discography there that I don't have yet. But this is like a side project from Katie from Waxahachie, and so the band is called Snowcaps. The album is called Snowcaps. It's not super long. What is it? The whole 13 songs, 34 minutes. But like the second song is called Heathcliff, and they sing like, if you go down, take me down with you, or something like that. And I was really listening to that going to Iowa, and I was like, this is not the best song to be listening to on a plane. So on the ground, I've been listening to it a lot, and I'm still digging that. It's kind of short, kind of quick. In that regard, it does feel a bit like a side project, but I'm digging it. So maybe you will too. Now I'm going to wrap this one up. I got to go hang up some streamers and some things for when everyone wakes up in the morning, celebrate a birthday. So as always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thank you again for listening. Thanks to Patrick Flaherty for getting this out to you. I'll be back with you on Thursday. Probably record something from the United Center. Ohio State's the first game of the day, and I like watching the Big Ten tournament. So probably knock something out from the arena on Thursday. So look for that in your feed before long. Until then, be kind, take care, and we'll talk soon.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.